Greetings, young mathematicians. Welcome to Saxon Math, Lesson 93, Two-Step Equations and Inequalities. I'm Mr. Petrie, and I assume at this point you have already done the mental math on page 642, and that you are ready to go. So A, positives, negatives. So negative 25 times negative 8. So here we've got our two negatives. We'll end up with a positive, and you can just think of this as how many quarters are in $1 so 8 quarters is $2, or in this case, 200. Order of operations, exponents. So looking at here. 2 5/10 times 3. Well, 3 quarters makes 75 cents. So I can think of that as 7 5/10. And then looking at our exponents, we have positive 8 plus negative 4. Since we're multiplying it, we're adding them together, but since we have a negative, we are subtracting them, getting us 10 to the power of 4. Ratios. Okay, so looking at this, well, the basic way I can see to do this, and I'm sure there's some definite shortcut to this, but just a quick so thinking in terms of cross multiplying, and essentially we'll end up with 22x equals 5,500, and we'll divide each one by 2. I know this isn't really mental math. I'm sure one of my students will look at this and be able to just look at it and see what the ratio would be. Indeed. So looking at this, you say okay. So this gets us 250. D, measurement. 2 square feet equals how many square inches? Well, it's mental math, so I'm going to cheat and not use any unit multipliers. So, well, just looking at this, 1 square foot is essentially 12 times 12 inches. So that would be, well, essentially 12 times 12 is 144 times 2. Basically 144 plus 144. 288 square inches. E, calculation. 8 times 2 1/4. Well, 8 times 2 is 16. Then back to that whole question, how many quarters are in $1? Well, since there's 8 quarters, then that would get us 2. It's 18. And what is 10% less than 60? Rather insulting. Since, well, 6 times 10 is 60, then 60 minus 6 is 54. Geometry. A slide moves triangle ABC to form move triangle. Transformed triangle ABC. What is the proper name of the transformation that transformed ABC? Well, we're not flipping it, we're not rotating it, we are sliding it. And if we're sliding it, we're calling it translation. Yeah, I don't know who comes up with these names, because you'd think transportation would be a better word, right? Because you're kind of transporting it, but no, translation. And estimate the product of 3 14/100ths and 4 9/10 centimeters. Well, really, we're estimating. So that's 3 times 5 centimeters equals 15 centimeters. No reason to overthink it. Okay, so today's lesson, I'm kind of skipping the new concept part because really this is not a new concept. We actually went over this in some pretty good detail in Investigation 7, and so really it's kind of more of a review, though it's a nice solid review, but it's definitely nothing that you haven't been looking at for half the year, I would say. So solve this equation. Show all steps. So remember that we've got scale and whatever is, that's not very equal scale, is it? Whatever's on one side has to equal the amount of whatever's on the other side. Basic. So essentially that means this side is equal to whatever this side works out to be. So anything we do to one side, we do to the other. So starting our second step, we can look at this and say, okay, here, I'll make it larger here. 4/10 of x plus 1 and 2/10 equals 6. So the first thing we're going to want to do is subtract from each side. Okay, getting us to a simplified version of 4/10 of x equals 4 8/10. And now we just divide each side by 4/10. Or looking at this, we're just looking for the number of groups. So we could just say 48 divided by 4. And spoilers, it's 12. Getting us to x equals 12. simplified. Example 2. Okay, doing this with fractions, which means that basically about the same thing, except we'll be busting out the reciprocal. So once again, I'll write this and speak it out. So negative 2/3 times x minus 1/2 equals 1/3. So the first thing we need to do is subtract from each side. Or excuse me, need to add. Oh my goodness. Need to add 1/2 to each side because we're looking at a subtraction sign there. Which means we've got to do the opposite. So I'm going to add you over there. And of course, in order to do this, we need to find our least common multiple. So in this case, it will be 2, 6 plus 3. 6 equals 5/6. So rewriting our equation here in a simplified form, we've got negative 2/3 times x equals 5/6. So now we need to multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to put you in parentheses. Going to try to make this very small on this side. Negative 3/2. Forgive my scrunching. And so that means we do the same thing over here. Multiply this by negative 3/2. So we're multiplying a positive number by a negative number. Or you could think of it as if we count the number of negative signs, well, it's 1, and 1 is an odd number. But however you want to think of it, we're going to have a negative number for our answer. And can we do a little cross-canceling goodness? Yes, we can. So we can cancel this out to 2, and we can cancel this one out to 1. So that will get us negative 5 times 1 is 5. 2 times 2 is 4, getting us a negative ratio of 5/4, negative 5/4. And if we really want to take it one extra step in simplification, we could say 1 and 1/4. So just for your information, this is the answer they have in the book. This, if you really wanted to completely simplify it, is what that would really look like. Example 3. Negative 15 equals 3 times x plus 6. Now this is kind of an awkward looking equation because our variables over on this side, and what I'm doing air quotes right now, the answer is on this side. But you know, that doesn't actually really mean anything. We could just as easily write the problem as 3x plus 6 equals negative 15. It would change absolutely nothing. we aren't going to this time. We'll solve it as is. Okay, so looking at this, negative 15 equals 3x plus 6. You can minus 6 from each side. But oh, what happens when you're doing negative 15 essentially minus a positive 6? So negative 15 minus 6 will actually send you left on the number line. So this will actually be negative 21 equals 3x. And dividing each side by 3 will get us a final answer, and still just keeping everything on the same side that they were on, it doesn't matter. Negative 7 equals x. Or x equals negative 7. Doesn't matter. Example 4. Solve this inequality, and graph its solution. Now, pay attention when we get to the graphing part, because really, it's not graphing I think that you really need to do. What you need to do is just essentially do it on the number line, is what you think of it. I just don't want you to feel like when you're doing the written practice or the practice set that you need to bust out the grid paper. You do not. Just number line. So looking at this, but is this really what we've seen before? 2x minus 5 is, whoa, greater than or equal to 1. What sorcery is this? Well, actually it changes nothing. Nothing at all, other than we can graph it. We just do it exactly the same way. So we're just going to add on each side. 5, 5, getting us 2x is equal to or greater than 6. Then dividing each side by 2 gets you x is equal to or greater than 3. So what would this look like? Well, I do need to warn you that actually the graphic I got is not that great for this in some ways, because, well, really all I have to work with over is on this side. However, it totally works. So if we're thinking that x is equal to or greater than 3, so should I have an open circle? And of course, if it's greater, then we're going this way on the number line. No, because it could be equal to it. So we are filling this in all the way. And I'm making this very big. If it was just greater than, it would be an open circle. If it's equal to or greater than, then guess what? You need to do a solid circle. Okay, good talk. All right, so going to the practice set. So please have this done by our discussion about it later. And remember over here where it says and graph the solutions, just do it on a number line. You don't need to really graph it. Okay, well, I look forward to going over these with you later, and you have a fantastic day.